The sun hung low over Maple Ridge, North Carolina, bleeding orange through the pine trees that lined Harper Lane. Arthur Rourke knelt on the scratched hardwood floor of his living room, his calloused fingers working through the laces of his son's sneakers. The boy's feet were small, fragile things that seemed too delicate for the world outside. "There you go, buddy," Arthur said, patting Riley's knee. The boy was 5 years old, thin-framed with his mother's dark hair and Arthur's careful eyes. He looked up at his father with a trust so complete it made Arthur's chest ache. Riley pressed closer, wrapping small arms around Arthur's neck. "Can we stay home today, Daddy?" Arthur heard the plea beneath the words. Riley always knew when Denise was coming. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe he'd learned to read the tension that crept through the house whenever Arthur's phone buzzed with Emma's texts. Either way, the boy understood enough to be afraid. "I wish we could," Arthur said quietly, smoothing his son's hair. The texture reminded him of corn silk, soft and fine. "But we'll be okay. I'll be right there with you." The front door opened without a knock. It never started with a knock. Denise Hammond swept into the house as though she owned it, her perfume arriving before she did. Something floral and overwhelming that clung to the air. She wore expensive sunglasses pushed up into her styled blonde hair, and her lips were painted a color Arthur had once heard Emma call power red. Everything about her screamed control, from the way she held her designer purse to the sharp click of her shoes against the floor. "Riley," her voice cut through the room, "stop clinging to your father and act normal for once." Arthur felt his son's grip tighten around his neck. He placed a hand on Riley's back, steady and protective, and rose to his feet in one smooth motion. The boy stayed wrapped around him, legs locked at Arthur's waist. "He's fine, Denise," Arthur said, keeping his voice level. Calm. He'd learned years ago that raising his voice only gave her ammunition. Denise pulled her sunglasses down, examining them both with eyes that reminded Arthur of a bird of prey sizing up something small and wounded. "He's not fine. Look at him. 5 years old and terrified of his own shadow." She turned toward the kitchen, calling out, "Emma, tell your husband to stop babying our grandson." Our grandson, as if Riley belonged to her by some divine right Arthur would never possess. Emma emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She'd changed since they first met. Or maybe Arthur had just stopped noticing when. The woman who used to laugh at his jokes and hold his hand during movies now looked at him the way someone might regard a piece of furniture they'd outgrown but couldn't afford to replace. "Mom's right," Emma said, not meeting Arthur's eyes. She focused on Riley instead, her voice taking on that careful, placating tone she used when she didn't want to start a fight but knew one was coming anyway. "You need to be tougher, sweetheart. The world isn't kind to sensitive boys." Arthur felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd swallowed this poison before, felt it burn going down, tasted the bitterness it left behind. But for Riley, he swallowed again. "He's 5, Arthur said quietly. Denise turned back toward them, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Exactly. Old enough to start learning what life's really about." She checked her watch. Gold. Expensive. Something she'd bought with her late husband's life insurance money. "We're going to my house. I want Riley to see something." Riley's fingers dug into Arthur's shoulders. "What is it?" Arthur asked, though he already felt the trap closing. "A surprise." Denise's smile widened. "Something that'll do the boy good." Emma moved to her mother's side, a united front Arthur knew better than to challenge directly. "It'll be fine, Arthur. Mom just wants to spend time with her grandson." Time. As if what Denise wanted was something innocent, something that wouldn't leave marks Arthur would spend weeks trying to heal. But he had no choice. Not without Emma's support. Not without proof of what he already knew in his bones, that Denise Hammond was poison, and his son was slowly being fed it in doses too small for anyone else to notice. "All right," Arthur said, setting Riley down gently. The boy looked up at him, eyes wide and frightened. Arthur crouched down, hands on his son's shoulders. "Stay close to me, okay? I'll be right there." Riley nodded, but the fear didn't leave his face. They drove separately. Arthur buckled Riley into his booster seat in the back of his 10-year-old truck, then climbed behind the wheel. Through the windshield, he watched Denise's silver luxury sedan pull out of the driveway, Emma in the passenger seat. Neither of them looked back. The drive to Denise's house took 15 minutes through tree-lined streets where the houses grew larger and the lawns more manicured. Arthur kept checking the rearview mirror, making eye contact with Riley when he could. The boy sat quietly, hands folded in his lap, trying so hard to be brave it made Arthur want to turn the truck around and drive until they ran out of road. But he didn't. He followed the silver sedan through Maple Ridge's winding streets, past the elementary school where Riley would start kindergarten in the fall, past the park where Arthur used to push him on the swings before Denise started calling it helicopter parenting. Denise's house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, a sprawling ranch-style home with white columns and a lawn that stayed green even in August. Arthur pulled up to the curb and killed the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. "Daddy." Riley's voice was small from the back seat. Arthur turned, forcing a smile. "Yeah, buddy. I don't want to go in." "I know." Arthur unbuckled his seatbelt and got out, opening Riley's door. He lifted his son out of the booster seat, setting him on the pavement. "But I'm with you. Nothing bad's going to happen while I'm here." It was a promise Arthur hoped he could keep. They walked up the driveway together, Riley's small hand gripping Arthur's with desperate strength. Denise and Emma waited by the side gate that led to the backyard. Denise held a key ring, jingling it impatiently. "Come on," she said. "We don't have all day." The gate opened with a rusty squeal. Beyond it, Denise's backyard stretched out. Unkempt grass grown too tall, weeds pushing through the cracks in the concrete patio, a wooden fence that leaned inward like it was tired of standing. It wasn't the carefully maintained showpiece the front yard suggested. This was the part of Denise Hammond no one was meant to see. And in the far corner, surrounded by chain-link fencing, stood a kennel. Arthur's stomach dropped. Inside the kennel, something moved. Brown and white, massive and muscular. A pit bull, pacing back and forth with restless energy. Its breath came in huffs that Arthur could hear even from 30 feet away. Riley stopped walking. His hand went rigid in Arthur's grip. "No," the boy whispered. "Daddy, no." Denise strode across the overgrown grass toward the kennel, Emma following more slowly. "Come on, Riley. Don't be a baby." Arthur felt his son start to shake. He crouched down, bringing himself eye level with Riley. "Listen to me. We're going to stay back here, okay? You don't have to go near it. Your father's turning you into a coward," Denise called back, not bothering to look at them. She reached the kennel and pressed her face close to the chain link. The dog stopped pacing, turning its massive head toward her. "This is what a real dog looks like, Riley. Not those toy breeds your father probably thinks are appropriate." Emma stood a few feet behind her mother, arms crossed over her chest. She glanced back at Arthur and Riley, something flickering across her face, guilt, maybe, or annoyance. Arthur couldn't tell anymore. "Come here, Riley," Denise commanded. "Now." Riley pressed against Arthur's leg, his whole body trembling. Arthur placed a hand on his son's shoulder, anchoring him. "He doesn't want to," Arthur called out, keeping his voice steady. "We can see it from here." Denise turned, and the look on her face made Arthur's blood run cold. It was triumph, pure, undiluted satisfaction at having found another weakness to exploit. Crying over a dog? She laughed, sharp and cruel. "Pathetic." "Mom," Emma said, her voice uncertain. "Don't be mean." But she didn't move, didn't step between her mother and her son, didn't choose. Denise pulled something from her pocket. Keys, the same one she'd been jingling at the gate. Arthur's heart slammed against his ribs. "What are you doing?" he asked, moving forward instinctively, Riley still pressed against him. Denise selected a key, fitting it into the padlock on the kennel gate. "Teaching him a lesson." "Denise, don't." The padlock clicked open. Clank. The sound echoed across the yard, metal against metal, final as a gunshot. The kennel gate swung open. For one frozen second, nothing moved. The pit bull stood in the opening, its head low, muscles coiled. Then it lunged forward. Riley screamed. The sound tore through Arthur like electricity, galvanizing every protective instinct he'd ever had. He spun, putting his body between his son and the dog, arms spread wide. "Get back!" but the dog wasn't coming for them. It charged straight at Denise. Her smile died. The color drained from her face as 70 pounds of muscle and teeth barreled toward her. She stumbled backward, expensive shoes catching on the overgrown grass, and fell. Her scream was high and sharp, laced with genuine terror. "Help! Emma, help me!" Emma ran forward, but Arthur was faster. He shoved Riley behind him and strode toward the dog, voice loud and commanding. "No! Stop! Sit!" The pit bull skidded to a halt 3 feet from Denise, who lay sprawled on the ground, her designer purse spilled open beside her. The dog's head swung toward Arthur, ears flat, eyes uncertain. "Sit," Arthur repeated, firmer this time. He'd grown up with dogs, learned from his father how to read them, how to speak their language. This animal wasn't aggressive. It was scared. The dog sat, panting, watching Arthur with wary intelligence. Behind him, Riley's sobs were the only sound. Arthur kept his eyes on the dog as he moved slowly forward, grabbing its collar. The tag read Brutus, along with a phone number Arthur didn't recognize. He guided the dog back into the kennel, closing the gate and snapping the padlock shut with shaking hands. When he turned around, Emma was helping her mother up. Denise's carefully styled hair had come loose, grass stains marked her white pants, and her hands trembled as she clutched Emma's arm. You saw that," Denise gasped, pointing at Arthur with a shaking finger. "That dog tried to kill me. It's violent, dangerous." Arthur stared at her, really looked at her, at the woman who'd just deliberately opened a kennel to terrorize his 5-year-old son, at the grandmother who'd laughed at Riley's tears, at the monster standing in expensive shoes, trying to twist reality into a shape that would let her escape responsibility. "You unlocked the kennel," Arthur said quietly. His voice didn't shake, didn't rise. It came out flat and cold and absolutely certain. "You did that. I was trying to. You were trying to scare Riley." Arthur picked up his son, who immediately buried his face in his father's neck. The boy's whole body shook with sobs. "You wanted to teach him a lesson. You said it yourself." Emma's face was pale. "Arthur, I'm sure Mom didn't mean." The dog ran at her. Arthur interrupted, because it recognized her, because she's been here before, because it knows her. He looked at Denise, who'd gone very still. Dogs don't react that way to strangers. Silence settled over the backyard, broken only by Riley's quiet crying. Denise recovered first, pulling herself upright, brushing grass from her clothes. When she spoke, her voice was sharp as ever, but Arthur heard the tremor beneath it. "Don't you dare accuse me of anything. That animal is dangerous. I'm calling animal control." "Do it," Arthur said. He turned and walked toward the gate, carrying his son, not waiting for permission or approval. "But I'm taking Riley home." "Arthur," Emma called after him, but he didn't stop. He didn't look back. He walked through the gate, across the driveway, and buckled Riley into the truck with hands that had steadied now that he had a purpose. Riley's sobs had quieted to hiccups, his small hands clutching Arthur's shirt. "I've got you," Arthur whispered, pressing a kiss to his son's forehead. "I've got you, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." It was a promise. And as Arthur drove away from Denise Hammond's house, watching it shrink in his rearview mirror, he knew with absolute certainty that everything had just changed. He'd been patient for years, swallowed insults, endured condescension, allowed himself to be diminished in his own home because he'd thought, hoped, that Emma would eventually see who her mother really was. But today, Denise had unleashed more than a dog. She'd unleashed something in Arthur that he'd kept carefully caged. The part of him that came from his father, the retired Army medic who'd taught him that protection sometimes meant war. As he drove through Maple Ridge's quiet streets with his traumatized son in the back seat, Arthur Rourke began to plan. That night, Riley woke screaming. Arthur was up instantly, his bare feet hitting the cold floor as he raced down the hallway to his son's room. He found Riley sitting upright in bed, tangled in his Spider-Man sheets, eyes wide and unseeing in the darkness. Hey, Arthur said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed and pulling the boy into his arms. "You're okay. You're home. You're safe." Riley's small body shook with sobs. "The dog, it was Daddy, it was so big." "I know." Arthur rocked him gently, the way he had when Riley was a baby. "It's over now. The dog can't hurt you." But even as he said it, Arthur knew it wasn't true. The damage was done. The fear was planted. Emma appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. "Is he okay?" Arthur didn't look at her. He had a nightmare. "Oh." She lingered for a moment, then retreated. Arthur heard their bedroom door close softly. He stayed with Riley until the boy's breathing slowed and his grip loosened, until sleep claimed him again. Then Arthur carried him to the master bedroom and laid him in the middle of the bed, tucking the covers around his small form. Riley would sleep better knowing his father was close. Arthur grabbed his pillow and went downstairs to the couch. The living room was dark except for the blue glow of the digital clock on the cable box. 2:47 a.m. Arthur lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, and let his mind work. He'd been a mechanic for 12 years. Before that, he'd worked construction with his father during summers, learning precision, patience, and how to build things that would last. His father had taught him other things too: how to read situations, how to document problems, how to fix things without leaving fingerprints. Arthur pulled out his phone. The screen brightness turned low so it wouldn't wake anyone. He opened his notes app and began typing. Saturday, August 12th, 2025, 3 p.m. Denise Hammond's residence incident. Deliberate release of pit bull from secured kennel witnesses. Emma Rourke, Riley Rourke, age 5. Details. Denise Hammond unlocked kennel gate despite Riley's visible distress and explicit fear. Dog charged at Denise, not at Riley. Dog displayed recognition of Denise. Denise showed no concern for Riley's emotional state before or after incident. Result: Riley experienced severe trauma. Night terrors beginning same evening. Arthur stared at the words glowing in the darkness. It felt clinical, cold, but that was the point. Emotion wouldn't protect Riley. Evidence would. Over the next week, Riley's nightmares continued. Arthur would wake to the sound of his son's screams 3, sometimes 4 times a night. The boy became withdrawn, jumping at sudden noises, refusing to go outside, even to play in their small backyard. On the 4th day, Arthur called Dr. Patricia Wells, a child therapist his father had recommended when Arthur first mentioned Riley's anxiety. The earliest appointment was in 2 weeks. "We can put you on the cancellation list," the receptionist said kindly. "Sometimes we get openings with a few days' notice." "Please," Arthur said. He really needs to see someone. That afternoon, Emma came home from her shift at the medical supply company, where she worked as an office manager. She found Arthur in the kitchen, making Riley's favorite dinner: chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs, with mac and cheese and apple slices arranged into a smiling face. "This is ridiculous," Emma said, setting her purse on the counter. "You're treating him like he's made of glass." Arthur kept cutting the apple, his movements precise and controlled. "He's traumatized. He's being dramatic." Emma opened the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of wine. "My mom called today. She said you're poisoning Riley against her." The knife stilled in Arthur's hand. "What?" "She said you've been telling Riley that she's dangerous, that she tried to hurt him." Emma poured herself a glass, not looking at him. "She's heartbroken, Arthur. She loves that boy." Arthur set the knife down carefully. "She unlocked a kennel and let a pit bull charge at our 5-year-old son. She was trying to help him get over his fear." Emma's voice rose, defensive in a way that told Arthur exactly who she'd been talking to. Maybe if he didn't coddle him so much, he wouldn't be such a mess. The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. Not because they hurt. He'd learned to let Emma's barbs glance off, but because they revealed how deep Denise's influence ran. "I'm taking Riley to a therapist," Arthur said quietly. Emma laughed, sharp and bitter. "Of course you are. More soft parenting. That's exactly what my mother said you'd do." "Your mother," Arthur said, turning to face his wife, "terrorized our son. If you can't see that, then we have bigger problems than my parenting style." Emma's face hardened. "Don't you dare attack my mother. She's done nothing but try to help this family while you sit around feeling sorry for yourself because you never became anything more than a mechanic." There it was, the truth beneath everything. Not about Riley, not about Denise, about Arthur himself, the man who hadn't climbed high enough, earned enough, become enough for the Hammond family to respect. "You're sleeping on the couch tonight," Emma said, finishing her wine in one long swallow. I can't look at you right now. Arthur nodded slowly. I've been sleeping on the couch all week. She blinked, surprised, then angry that she hadn't noticed. Emma left the kitchen without another word. Arthur finished making dinner. He brought it upstairs on a tray and sat with Riley while the boy picked at his food. He didn't finish even half, but Arthur didn't push. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Daddy, Riley asked as Arthur was tucking him in that night. Are you and Mommy fighting? Arthur smoothed his son's hair, choosing his words carefully. Grown-ups sometimes disagree. But that's not your fault, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. Is it because of the dog? No. Arthur pressed a kiss to Riley's forehead. You were so brave that day. I'm proud of you. Riley's eyes filled with tears. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, Arthur said softly. It means you keep going even when you are. After Riley fell asleep, Arthur went back downstairs with his laptop. The living room was dark and quiet, just him and the soft glow of the screen. He opened a browser window and searched, documenting emotional abuse of children. The results flooded in. Legal websites, parenting forums, stories from other fathers who'd fought for their kids. Arthur read until his eyes burned, taking notes, learning the language of family court, understanding what evidence would matter and what wouldn't. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. How's the boy? Arthur typed back. Not good. Nightmares every night. The response came immediately. Document everything. Dates, times, what triggered it. They'll try to say you're overreacting. Don't give them room. I won't, Arthur replied. Good man, his father texted back. When you're ready to move, move fast. People like Denise hang themselves with their own behavior. You just need to be there to pull the rope. Arthur stared at the message for a long moment. His father had been right about most things in life. Arthur hoped he was right about this too. The next morning, Denise showed up unannounced again. Arthur was making breakfast when he heard the front door open, Emma's voice calling out, We're in here, Mom. He didn't turn around, just kept cracking eggs into a bowl, whisking them with mechanical precision. Where's my grandson? Denise's voice came from behind him, bright and performative. I brought him a present. Riley, who'd been sitting at the kitchen table coloring, went very still. Arthur saw it in his peripheral vision. The way his son's hand stopped moving, the crayon frozen above the paper. He's eating breakfast, Arthur said, still not turning around. Oh, he can take a break. Denise moved past Arthur, her perfume overwhelming in the small kitchen. She set a wrap box on the table in front of Riley. Go on, honey. Open it. Riley looked at his father. There was something in that look Arthur had never seen before. Not just fear, but a plea. Save me. He's not hungry right now, Denise. Arthur said, finally turning around. Maybe you should call before coming over. Denise's smile tightened. I don't need permission to visit my daughter's home. It's also my home. Arthur kept his voice level, reasonable. And Riley needs space right now. He's still processing what happened last week. Processing. Denise laughed. He's 5 years old, Arthur. He doesn't need to process anything. He needs to move on. She turned back to Riley, her voice dropping into that saccharine tone adults use when they're performing affection. You're fine now, aren't you, sweetheart? That dog didn't even touch you. Riley's lip trembled. He looked down at his coloring page. A picture of a family standing in front of a house. Everyone smiling except for the grandmother figure he'd scribbled over with black crayon. Arthur moved without thinking, stepping between Denise and his son. Leave him alone. Excuse me? I said leave him alone. Arthur's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. You're not welcome here right now. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face flushed. Arthur, you can't kick my mother out of our house. I can and I am. Denise's face went red. You ungrateful. She caught herself, glancing at Riley, then back at Arthur. When she spoke again, her voice dripped with false concern. Emma, do you see how he's speaking to me? In front of your child? Emma looked between them, torn. For one brief second, Arthur thought she might actually see what was happening, that she might choose her son over her mother. Then she said, Arthur, apologize. The words hung in the air. Arthur felt something settle inside him, cold and final. This was who Emma was, who she'd always been. He just refused to see it. No, he said simply. Denise gasped. Emma's mouth fell open. Arthur crouched down beside Riley, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Come on, buddy. Let's go upstairs." Riley scrambled off his chair and grabbed Arthur's hand, nearly running from the kitchen. They climbed the stairs together, and Arthur heard Denise's voice rising behind them, shrill with indignation. "You see what I mean, Emma? He's impossible. He's turning that boy against his own family. Against me." Arthur closed Riley's bedroom door, muffling the voices downstairs. Riley climbed onto his bed, pulling his knees to his chest. "Is Grandma mad at me?" he asked in a small voice. Arthur sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "No, buddy, this isn't about you. This is about grown-up stuff. But she brought me a present." "I know." Arthur looked at the superhero posters on the walls, the toy cars scattered across the floor, the bookshelf filled with stories about brave kids who faced monsters and won. Sometimes people give presents when they want something. That doesn't mean you have to accept them. Riley leaned against his father's side. "I don't like her, Daddy." "That's okay," Arthur said softly. "You don't have to." They sat like that for a long time, listening to the muffled argument downstairs. Eventually, Arthur heard the front door slam. Car doors. An engine starting. Silence. Emma's footsteps on the stairs came slowly, reluctantly. She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, face set. "My mother's gone," she said flatly. "Happy now?" Arthur met her eyes. "No, I'm not." She was just trying to make things right, trying to help Riley get over his fear. By cornering him, by forcing herself on him when he's clearly uncomfortable. Emma's jaw tightened. "You're twisting everything, making her out to be some kind of monster. I'm protecting our son. You're isolating him." Emma's voice broke. "First you tell me he can't go to my mother's house. Now, she can't even visit him here. What's next, Arthur? Are you going to cut us off from my whole family?" Arthur stood, moving to the doorway, but not past Emma, keeping himself between her and Riley. "I would never isolate Riley, but I won't let him be hurt either. She's his grandmother, and that doesn't give her the right to traumatize him." Emma stared at him, and Arthur saw something crumble in her expression. Not anger, not even hurt, just exhaustion, as if she'd finally realized that this argument, this marriage, this entire situation was too heavy to carry anymore. "I'm going to my mother's for a few days," she said quietly. "I need space to think." "All right." Emma blinked, surprised. "That's it? You're not going to argue? Would it change anything?" She opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. 15 minutes later, Arthur watched from Riley's window as Emma backed her car out of the driveway. She didn't look up, didn't wave goodbye to her son. "Is Mommy coming back?" Riley asked from the bed. Arthur returned to his side, pulling the boy close. "I don't know, buddy, but whatever happens, we're going to be okay. You and me." That afternoon, while Riley napped, Arthur took his phone into the garage. He called his father first. "She left," Arthur said without preamble. "Good," his father replied. The old man had never liked Emma, though he'd been careful never to say it outright. "How's Riley?" "Confused. Scared. Still having nightmares." "And you?" Arthur leaned against his workbench, surrounded by tools hanging in precise order on the pegboard. Wrenches organized by size, screwdrivers by type, everything in its place because order was how Arthur understood the world. "I'm done being patient." His father was quiet for a moment. "You ready to really fight? For Riley? I'll burn the whole world down if I have to." "That's my boy." His father's voice carried a grim satisfaction. "Then listen carefully. Here's what you need to do." They talked for an hour. His father had experience with family court, not from his own life, but from the stories of soldiers he'd served with, men who'd fought battles at home that were harder than anything they'd faced overseas. He knew the language, the strategies, the mistakes to avoid. "Start a journal," his father said. "Every interaction with Denise. Every time Emma chooses her mother over Riley. Dates, times, what was said, how Riley reacted. Make it clinical. Don't editorialize. Just facts. I've been keeping notes on my phone." "Good. Keep doing that. But also keep a physical journal, handwritten, dated. Judges like physical evidence. Shows commitment." Arthur grabbed a pencil and started writing on a paper towel. "What else?" "Document Riley's nightmares. Keep a sleep log. If he starts therapy, Get copies of everything. The therapist's notes will be crucial. Denise will say I'm coaching him, that I'm putting ideas in his head. Let her. The therapist will be able to tell if a kid's been coached. Riley's fear is real. That'll show. Arthur nodded, even though his father couldn't see him. What about Emma? What about her? She's his mother. The courts favor mothers. His father snorted. The courts favor the best parent. Don't assume you've lost before you start. Emma's made her choice by siding with Denise. Document that too. Every time she chooses her mother over Riley's well-being, write it down. I feel like I'm preparing for war. You are, his father said bluntly. And in war, you protect what matters. Everything else is expendable. After they hung up, Arthur stood in his garage for a long time, looking at the paper towel covered in his own handwriting. Strategies, evidence, legal terminology. He folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he went back inside to wake Riley from his nap. They spent the afternoon in the backyard, the safe space Denise had never violated, playing catch with a soft foam ball. Riley laughed for the first time in days when Arthur pretended to miss an easy throw, and that sound was worth every fight to come. That night, Emma didn't call. Denise did. Arthur let it go to voicemail. When he played it back later, after Riley was asleep, he listened to her voice fill the kitchen with poison. Arthur, I know you're angry with me, but you need to understand that everything I do comes from love. Riley needs structure, discipline, strength, things you're clearly not capable of providing. Emma's with me now, and we're discussing what's best for our family. I hope you'll do the right thing and apologize so we can move past this unfortunate incident. The message ended with a click. Arthur played it again, this time hitting the button to save it. Then he opened his laptop and began transcribing word for word. August 18th, 2025, 8:47 p.m. voicemail from Denise Hammond. He included everything. The implied threats. The undermining of his parenting. The phrase, our family, that excluded him entirely. Around midnight, Arthur's phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma. We need to talk. Come to my mother's house tomorrow at 2. Arthur stared at the message. A summons. An ambush. He knew what waited for him there. Denise at Emma's elbow. A united front ready to tell him how everything was his fault. How he needed to change. How he was failing as a husband and father. He typed back, I'll come. But Riley stays home. The response came quickly. That's fine. This is about adult matters anyway. Arthur set the phone down and sat at the kitchen table, the house dark and silent around him. In his mind, he began preparing for battle. The next afternoon, Arthur dropped Riley off at his father's house by Lake Avery. The old man lived in a small cabin surrounded by pine trees, the kind of place where silence felt like peace instead of emptiness. How long will I be here, Grandpa? Riley asked, clutching his backpack full of coloring books and toy cars. Just a few hours, kid, Arthur's father said, ruffling Riley's hair. He looked at Arthur over his grandson's head. You good? Arthur nodded. I'll call when I'm done. Remember what I told you. Don't lose your temper. Let them talk themselves into corners. I remember. The drive to Denise's house felt like driving toward a cliff edge. Arthur's hands were steady on the wheel, his mind clear. He'd spent the morning reviewing his notes, committing every date and incident to memory. He wasn't going there to fight. He was going to collect evidence. Before he left his truck, Arthur pulled out his phone and opened the voice memo app. He pressed record and slipped the phone into his shirt pocket, microphone facing out. Denise's front door opened before he reached it. Emma stood in the entryway, her face pale and tired. Behind her, Arthur could see Denise's silhouette in the living room. Come in, Emma said quietly. Arthur stepped inside. The house smelled like her mother's perfume and fresh coffee. Denise sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, the picture of wronged innocence. Sit down, Arthur, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. Arthur remained standing. This won't take long. Denise's expression hardened. I think you'll want to hear what we have to say. I'm listening. Emma moved to sit beside her mother. The united front Arthur had expected, shoulder to shoulder against him. We've been talking, Emma began, her voice rehearsed. About Riley. About our marriage. About the way things have been going. And Arthur kept his voice neutral. And we think you need help, Denise cut in. Professional help. Therapy. Because your behavior has become erratic and controlling. Arthur felt the phone recording in his pocket. Let them talk. Let them reveal themselves. How have I been controlling? He asked calmly. You're isolating Riley, Emma said. You won't let him see my mother. You're filling his head with fears about dogs, about her, about everything. Riley's afraid because your mother released a pit bull that charged at him. It charged at me. Denise's voice rose. Not Riley. The dog was dangerous. And instead of being grateful that I protected everyone, you're using it as an excuse to turn my daughter against me. Arthur looked at Emma. Really looked at her. Is that what you think happened? That I'm turning you against your mother? Emma's eyes filled with tears. You're always criticizing her. Always making her feel unwelcome. Always acting like she's some kind of threat. She is a threat, Arthur said quietly. To Riley. That's insane. Denise stood, her composure cracking. I love that boy. Everything I do is for his own good. But you're poisoning his mind. You're making him weak. Pathetic. Just like you. There was the truth beneath the performance. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it up. The voice memo app showed a timer ticking up. 37 minutes. Denise's face went pale. What is that? Evidence, Arthur said calmly. Of this conversation. Of you calling your 5-year-old grandson pathetic. Of you admitting that you deliberately released that dog. I never, Denise started. You said, I protected everyone, Arthur interrupted. But you're the one who unlocked the kennel. You put Riley in danger, and now you're trying to rewrite what happened. Emma looked between them, confusion warring with denial on her face. Arthur, you can't record people without permission. Actually, I can. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. I'm allowed to record conversations I'm part of. Arthur pocketed the phone, and I've been part of a lot of conversations lately. Denise's shock transformed into rage. You've been recording us? Behind our backs. I've been documenting abuse. There's a difference. Abuse. Denise's laugh was sharp and mocking. You call it abuse when I try to teach my grandson some strength? When I try to make him into something other than a sniveling coward? Arthur felt something cold and final settle in his chest. He looked at Emma one last time, giving her a chance to speak, to defend their son, to choose differently. She stayed silent. I'm filing for primary custody, Arthur said. The words fell into the room like stones into water. Emma's face crumbled. What? Riley needs protection. Since neither of you seem interested in providing it, I will. You can't do that, Denise said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Emma's his mother. The courts will never. The courts will see the evidence. The recordings. The therapist's reports. Riley's nightmares. Your own words. Arthur moved toward the door. I'm done being patient. I'm done letting you hurt my son. And I'm done pretending this marriage still exists. Arthur, wait. Emma stood, reaching for him. He stopped but didn't turn around. You could have chosen him. At any point in the last week, you could have chosen Riley. But you chose her instead. She's my mother. And he's your son. Arthur opened the door. I hope that was worth it. He left, walking to his truck with steady steps. Behind him, he heard Emma crying, heard Denise's voice rising in shrill denial. He didn't look back. As Arthur drove away, he called his father. How'd it go? The old man asked. I got everything I needed, Arthur replied. And I'm ready to start. Good. Come pick up Riley. I'll make us all dinner, and we'll talk strategy. Dad. Yeah. Thank you for teaching me how to fight. His father was quiet for a moment. Some battles are worth burning everything down for, son. This is one of them. Arthur spent the evening at his father's cabin, eating simple food and watching Riley play by the lake. The boy seemed lighter here, away from the house that held bad memories, away from the people who hurt him. When Arthur finally drove them both home that night, Emma's car wasn't in the driveway. The house felt empty in a way it never had before. Not sad, exactly, but hollow. A space waiting to be filled with something better. Arthur carried a sleeping Riley upstairs and tucked him into bed. Then he went to his own bedroom and opened the closet, pulling out a suitcase. He filled it with Emma's clothes, her shoes, her toiletries from the bathroom, everything that was hers. When the suitcase was full, he set it by the front door. She could come get it when she was ready. Or not. Either way, Arthur was done waiting. 3 weeks later, Arthur sat in a lawyer's office in downtown Maple Ridge, a folder of evidence on the desk between them. Jennifer Walsh was 43, sharp-eyed, with silver streaks in her dark hair and the kind of direct manner that inspired confidence. She'd come highly recommended by his father's friend, a retired captain who'd been through a custody battle himself years before. "Tell me everything," Jennifer said, pen poised over a yellow legal pad. Arthur started at the beginning. The pit bull incident, the nightmares, the recordings, Emma's consistent choice to side with her mother over Riley's well-being. He spoke clearly and calmly, presenting facts without embellishment, the way his father had taught him. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her pen moving across the paper in swift, precise strokes. When Arthur finished, she set down her pen and looked at him directly. "You've done good work documenting all of this," she said. "Most parents come to me with vague complaints and emotion. You brought me evidence. Will it be enough?" Jennifer leaned back in her chair, considering. Family court is unpredictable. Judges have wide discretion, but you have several strong factors in your favor. Riley's therapist reports are particularly compelling. Arthur had gotten Riley into therapy after a week on the cancellation list. Dr. Wells had been working with his son twice a week, helping him process the trauma. Her clinical notes painted a clear picture of a child suffering from anxiety directly linked to his grandmother's behavior. "What are our chances?" Arthur asked. "With the recordings? With the therapist's testimony? With the grandmother's documented pattern of behavior?" Jennifer smiled grimly. "I'd say we have a very strong case for primary custody. Emma can have visitation, but supervised at first. And Denise Hammond doesn't get anywhere near Riley until she completes anger management and parenting classes. She won't accept that. She doesn't have to. That's what court orders are for." Jennifer pulled out a file, flipping it open. "Now, there's something else you should know. I did some preliminary research on Denise Hammond. Did you know there have been 3 animal control complaints about that property in the last 2 years?" Arthur straightened. "No. 2 complaints about excessive barking. One about suspected animal neglect. A neighbor reported seeing a dog left outside in extreme heat without adequate water." Jennifer slid a printout across the desk. "The dog in question matches the description of the pit bull you encountered." Arthur stared at the report. "So she's been abusing that animal." "It appears so, which explains why the dog reacted to her with aggression." "Can we use this in court?" "Absolutely. It establishes a pattern of poor judgment and potential cruelty. If she's willing to mistreat an animal, what does that say about how she treats vulnerable people, like children?" Arthur felt something shift inside him. Not quite hope, but something close to it. The sense that justice might actually be possible. Over the next week, Jennifer filed the custody petition. Emma received the papers at Denise's house, where she'd been staying since their confrontation. She called Arthur that night, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "How could you?" she demanded. "How could you do this to me?" Arthur was in Riley's room, reading Where the Wild Things Are for the 3rd time that week. His son had fallen asleep during the second reading, but Arthur had continued anyway, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm. "I'm protecting our son," Arthur said quietly, closing the book. "By taking him away from his mother? By dragging us through court? You took yourself away from him when you chose your mother over his well-being. This is just making it official." Emma was silent for a long moment. "My lawyer says you'll lose. Says judges always favor mothers. Your lawyer's wrong." "Arthur," her voice broke. "Can we fix this? Can we try counseling or something? I don't want to lose Riley." Arthur stood, walking to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, neighbors' porch lights glowing warm against the darkness. Normal families doing normal things. He wondered what that felt like. "I offered counseling 2 years ago," Arthur said. "When your mother first started criticizing everything I did. You said I was being too sensitive, that I needed to toughen up. That's different, is it?" Arthur turned away from the window. "You spent our entire marriage making me smaller so your mother could feel bigger. I'm done shrinking, Emma, and I won't let Riley shrink either. You're being unreasonable. I'm being a father." Arthur ended the call. The next day, a text arrived from Leo Hammond, Emma's younger brother. Arthur hadn't spoken to Leo in months. They'd exchanged pleasantries at family gatherings, made small talk about sports and weather, but never anything substantial. Leo was a software developer in Raleigh, quiet and careful, someone who'd learned to stay below his mother's radar. The text was simple. Can we meet? I have something you need to hear. Arthur stared at the message, suspicion warring with curiosity. He typed back, when and where? Coffee shop on Main. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone. Arthur showed up 15 minutes early, taking a table in the back corner with a clear view of the entrance. Leo arrived exactly on time, looking thinner than Arthur remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. Thanks for coming, Leo said, sliding into the seat across from him. He set his phone on the table, screen down. I wasn't sure you would. What's this about? Leo ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture. I heard about the custody case. Mom's been calling me nonstop, trying to get me to testify on her behalf. She wants me to say you're unstable, a bad father. Arthur waited, saying nothing. But I can't do that, Leo continued. Because it's not true, and because... He trailed off, looking at his hands. Because I know what she's like, what she's always been like. What do you mean? Leo looked up, and Arthur saw something raw in his eyes. Pain that had been there a long time, maybe forever. She did the same things to me when I was Riley's age. Called me weak, pathetic, set up situations to toughen me up. Once, she locked me in the basement for an hour because I cried when our dog died. Arthur felt his chest tighten. Jesus, Leo. Emma doesn't remember. Or she's convinced herself it wasn't that bad. Leo picked up his phone, unlocking it. But I remember. And I've been recording her for the last 6 months. He pulled up an audio file, pressing play. Denise's voice filled the small space between them, loud and clear. I let that dog scare the kid on purpose. Maybe now he'll toughen up instead of crying every 5 minutes. Arthur's acting like I tried to kill the brat, but honestly, if it teaches Riley to be less of a sissy, then it was worth it. The recording continued. Laughter. Other voices agreeing, enabling. Arthur recognized one as Emma's aunt. Leo stopped the playback. This was from a dinner party at Mom's house 2 weeks ago. She was bragging about it, proud of herself. Arthur stared at the phone. Can I have a copy of that? I already sent it to your lawyer. Leo met his eyes. I also wrote a statement about my own childhood. Things I've never told anyone. If you need me to testify, I will. Why are you doing this? Leo's expression hardened. Because I couldn't protect myself when I was Riley's age. But I can help protect him now. He stood, picking up his phone. Don't let her win, Arthur. Whatever it takes. Don't let her do to Riley what she did to me. After Leo left, Arthur sat alone in the coffee shop for a long time, staring at his own phone. Then he texted Jennifer Walsh. Did you get Leo Hammond's recording? The response came quickly. Just listen to it. This changes everything. With this admission, we're not just fighting for custody. We're building a case for supervised visitation only. Possibly a restraining order against Denise. Arthur felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. The weeks leading up to the custody hearing moved with strange speed. Riley continued therapy, slowly beginning to sleep through the night again. Emma moved back into the house. Court ordered during the proceedings, but she and Arthur lived like strangers, passing each other in hallways, speaking only about logistics. Denise tried to visit once. Arthur answered the door with his phone recording. I know my rights, she said, chin raised. I have every legal right to see my grandson. Not according to this temporary protection order. Arthur held up the document Jennifer had filed based on Leo's testimony and the admission recording. You're not allowed within 100 feet of Riley until the hearing. Denise's face went through several colors. You'll pay for this. When the judge hears what kind of father you really are. The judge will hear the recording of you admitting you deliberately traumatized a 5-year-old child to toughen him up. Arthur kept his voice calm. They'll hear your own son testify about the abuse you put him through. They'll see Dr. Wells' reports about Riley's trauma. And they'll make their decision based on evidence, not your performance. He closed the door while she was still sputtering on the porch. Emma found him in the kitchen afterward, her face pale. Did you really get a protection order against my mother? Temporary. Until the hearing. You're destroying our family. Arthur turned to face her fully. Your mother destroyed our family the day she decided Riley's fear was something to mock instead of respect. I'm just making sure there's something left to salvage. You mean taking Riley away from me? I mean protecting him. If you can't see the difference, then yes, taking him away from you is part of that. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but Arthur felt nothing. The love he'd once had for her had burned away in the face of her repeated choices. What remained was only a kind of distant sadness for the life they might have had if she'd been different. If he'd been different. If Denise Hammond had never existed. But dwelling on might-have beens was useless. Arthur had learned that from his father, from the army stories about soldiers who spent their lives looking backward instead of forward. All that mattered now was the battle ahead and the son he was fighting to save. 3 days before the hearing, Jennifer called. "I have news," she said without preamble. Emma's lawyer reached out. They want to negotiate a settlement. Arthur sat down slowly. "What kind of settlement?" "They're offering you primary custody. Emma gets visitation every other weekend and holidays. Denise is permanently barred from unsupervised contact with Riley unless and until she completes court-mandated therapy and anger management." It was everything Arthur had been fighting for. And yet, what's the catch, he asked. Jennifer's pause told him everything. They want you to agree not to pursue a restraining order against Denise. And they want the recordings sealed, not admissible in any future proceedings. Arthur stood, pacing the kitchen. Through the window, he could see Riley playing in the backyard, finally comfortable in that space again. The boy was building something with his toy trucks, talking to himself in the concentrated way children do when they're lost in imagination. "They're trying to protect her reputation," Arthur said. "Yes." Denise Hammond is apparently worried about how this will look to her social circle. If the recordings come out in open court, it becomes public record. Anyone could access them. Good. Let everyone know what kind of person she is. Arthur. Jennifer's voice took on a careful note. "I understand the impulse for justice, but consider what you're really fighting for. Is it punishment for Denise or protection for Riley?" Arthur closed his eyes. "You think I should take the deal? I think you should consider that a full custody battle puts Riley through testimony, through psychological evaluation, through having his trauma discussed in open court. The settlement gives you everything you actually need, Riley's safety, without putting him through that additional trauma." Arthur thought about Riley in a courtroom, small and scared, describing the pit bull incident to a judge. Thought about Dr. Wells having to detail every nightmare, every regression, every sign of trauma. Thought about his son being reduced to evidence in a legal battle. "Can we add conditions?" Arthur asked. "Such as, Denise doesn't just need therapy. She needs to complete it successfully and get clearance from Riley's therapist before she's allowed any contact. Even supervised. I can push for that. And any violation of the visitation terms, any attempt by Emma to facilitate unauthorized contact with Denise, results in immediate modification of custody." "That's harsh, Arthur." "It's necessary." Arthur watched Riley place a toy ambulance carefully next to a fire truck, arranging his world into the order 5-year-olds believe is possible. "My son's safety isn't negotiable." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "All right, I'll present your counteroffer. They'll probably accept it. Without the recordings going public, Denise avoids social embarrassment. That's what she really wants. She should be embarrassed. Probably, but embarrassment isn't protection. Legal boundaries are." After they hung up, Arthur went outside and sat on the back porch steps. Riley looked up from his trucks and smiled. The unreserved, gap-toothed smile of a child who felt safe again. "Daddy, come see what I built." Arthur crossed the yard and crouched beside his son, examining the careful arrangement of vehicles. "Tell me about it." "It's a rescue station," Riley explained, moving an ambulance forward. "This one helps people who are hurt. And this one," he picked up a fire truck, "saves people from scary things." Arthur felt his throat tighten. "That's a good station. Everyone needs help sometimes." Riley looked up at him, brown eyes serious. "Even grown-ups?" "Especially grown-ups." The boy nodded, returning his attention to his trucks. Arthur stayed beside him, watching the way Riley's small hands moved with such care, such deliberate gentleness. Whatever happened in court, whatever legal battles lay ahead, Arthur had already won the only fight that mattered. His son felt safe again. 2 days later, the settlement was finalized. Emma signed without argument, her face blank and distant. Denise wasn't present. She'd been advised by her lawyer not to attend any proceedings while under the temporary protection order. Arthur and Emma sat in Jennifer's office, signing documents that dissolved their marriage and restructured their son's life. When it was done, Emma stood to leave, then hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. Arthur looked up. "What? Do you hate me?" The question hung in the air. Arthur considered honestly. Did he hate her? The woman who'd shared his bed for 7 years, who'd given him the most important person in his world, who'd then chosen her toxic mother over their child's well-being. "No," he said finally. "I don't hate you, Emma. I'm just sad for you. Sad that you can't see what your mother is. Sad that you chose her over Riley. Mostly, I'm sad that you'll have to live with that choice for the rest of your life." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I was trying to keep everyone happy." "You can't keep everyone happy. Sometimes you have to choose." Arthur gathered his papers, standing. "I chose Riley. You chose your mother. Now we both live with that." He walked past her without looking back. 6 months passed. Arthur and Riley lived in a small rental cabin near Lake Avery, just a few miles from Arthur's father's place. The cabin had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like pine, and a porch that overlooked the water. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, a space built on protection rather than conflict, on peace rather than performance. Riley's nightmares had stopped. He slept through the night now, waking with the sun instead of screaming into darkness. Dr. Wells had reduced their sessions to once a month, monitoring rather than treating, watching a child heal in the way resilient things do when given room to grow. Arthur's life had simplified in ways he hadn't expected. He'd transferred to a different mechanic shop closer to the lake, working for an old friend of his father's who didn't ask complicated questions about custody battles and failed marriages. The work was honest, the hours were reasonable, and Arthur came home each day with grease under his fingernails and a clear conscience. Emma saw Riley every other weekend, as agreed. She picked him up Friday evenings and dropped him off Sunday afternoons, their exchanges brief and civil. Sometimes Arthur saw shadows in her eyes, regret, maybe, or recognition of what she'd lost. But they never spoke beyond logistics, never tried to bridge the canyon that had opened between them. Denise Hammond had been required to complete 6 months of therapy and anger management as part of the settlement. Arthur received quarterly updates from the court-appointed monitor. She'd attended every session, but, according to the therapist's reports, showed minimal insight into problematic behaviors and limited willingness to accept responsibility. In other words, she went through the motions but changed nothing. The final hearing to determine whether Denise would be allowed supervised visitation was scheduled for a Friday in February. Arthur sat in the courtroom with Jennifer, watching Denise's lawyer argue that his client had completed all court-mandated requirements. "Mrs. Hammond has attended every therapy session," the lawyer said. "She's completed anger management. She's demonstrated commitment to change." Judge Maria Santos, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, flipped through the file in front of her. "I've reviewed the therapist's reports. They indicate that while Mrs. Hammond attended sessions, she showed minimal progress in recognizing how her behavior affected her grandson. With respect, Your Honor, the mandate was attendance and completion, not." "The mandate," Judge Santos interrupted, "was to demonstrate fitness for supervised contact with a minor child who suffered trauma as a direct result of her actions. Attendance is necessary, but not sufficient." She looked up directly at Denise. "Mrs. Hammond, I've also reviewed Dr. Wells' report on Riley's progress. According to his therapist, Riley still exhibits anxiety when asked about his grandmother. He's expressed clearly that he doesn't feel safe around you. Can you tell me why that might be?" Denise stood, smoothing her skirt. She wore a conservative dress and pearls, costume jewelry for the performance of respectability. "Your Honor, I believe my grandson has been coached by his father to fear me. Arthur has always resented my influence in my daughter's life, and he's using Riley as a weapon against me." Judge Santos's expression didn't change. Dr. Wells is an experienced child psychologist. Her report indicates Riley's fear is genuine, not coached. She also notes that Riley's anxiety decreased significantly once contact with you ceased. How do you explain that? Denise's composure cracked slightly. Children are suggestible. If they're told often enough that someone is dangerous. Mrs. Hammond. Judge Santos set down her pen. I've presided over family court for 23 years. I've seen genuinely coached children and genuinely traumatized ones. Riley Rourke falls into the latter category. She picked up a document from the stack. I've also reviewed the recording in which you admitted deliberately releasing a pit bull to toughen up a 5-year-old child. In your therapy sessions, did you address why you thought terrorizing a kindergartner was acceptable parenting? The courtroom was silent. Denise's face went through several expressions: shock, anger, calculation. I was speaking hyperbolically. I never intended. You never intended for your words to be recorded, perhaps. But intention doesn't erase impact. Judge Santos closed the file. Based on the evidence before me, including Riley's ongoing anxiety, the therapist's assessment, and your own documented admission, I'm denying supervised visitation at this time. Denise gasped. Emma, sitting behind her mother, went pale. Furthermore, Judge Santos continued, I'm extending the protection order for an additional 12 months. Mrs. Hammond, you're prohibited from contacting Riley Rourke directly or indirectly. This includes through third parties, social media, or any other means. After 12 months, you may petition for supervised visitation, but only if you can provide evidence of genuine therapeutic progress, not just attendance, but meaningful change verified by a licensed psychologist. Judge Santos looked at Arthur. Mr. Rourke, I'm granting you sole legal and physical custody. Ms. Rourke's visitation will continue as established, with the added stipulation that she may not facilitate any contact between Riley and Mrs. Hammond during her parenting time. Violation of this order will result in modification of visitation. Do you understand, Ms. Rourke? Emma stood, her voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Judge Santos banged her gavel. We're adjourned. Arthur stood on shaking legs. It was over. Really over. Riley was safe, protected not just by Arthur's vigilance, but by legal force that even Denise Hammond couldn't argue away. Jennifer touched his arm. You did it. We did it. Arthur corrected. Outside the courthouse, Denise and Emma stood by their car. Arthur watched them from a distance, the older woman gesturing sharply, the younger one crying. A relationship built on manipulation and control, finally revealed for what it was. He felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. His phone buzzed. A text from his father. How'd it go? Arthur typed back. We won. Riley's protected. The response came immediately. Damn right he is. Come by for dinner tonight. Your son needs to know what his old man accomplished. Arthur drove to the lake house, taking the long route past town. Spring was coming early this year. Daffodils pushing through the last snow, trees beginning to bud. The world renewing itself the way it always did, indifferent to human drama, offering second chances to everything that survived winter. Riley was at school when Arthur arrived home. The cabin felt peaceful in the afternoon light, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams that slanted through the windows. Arthur made coffee and sat on the porch, looking out at the lake. He thought about the past year, the terror in Riley's eyes after the pit bull incident, the nightmares, the slow process of documenting abuse, the legal battles, the dissolution of his marriage. All of it leading to this moment of quiet peace on a porch overlooking water. Had been worth it? Arthur thought of Riley's smile this morning, easy and unforced. Thought of the way his son had hugged him before school. No fear in the gesture, just love. Thought of the nights Riley slept peacefully, no longer waking in terror. Yes, it had been worth everything. At 3:30, the school bus stopped at the end of the long driveway. Riley hopped off, backpack bouncing, and ran toward the cabin. Arthur stood, meeting him at the bottom of the porch steps. Daddy! Riley launched himself forward, and Arthur caught him easily, swinging him up. Guess what? I got a gold star on my reading today. That's great, buddy. I'm so proud of you. Riley pulled back to look at his father's face. Are you okay? You look different. Arthur set his son down, crouching to be eye level with him. I'm good. Really good. I have something to tell you. What? Remember how we talked about Grandma Denise? About how she can't visit for a while? Riley nodded, his expression growing cautious. Well, the judge said she can't visit for a long time. At least a year. Maybe more. Arthur placed his hands on Riley's shoulders. You're safe, Riley. Nobody's going to hurt you or scare you. I made sure of it. Riley was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, so she can't come here? Even if she wants to? No, she can't. What about Mom? Mom could still visit. Every other weekend, like always. But she promised not to bring Grandma Denise. And if she breaks that promise, the judge will make her visit less. Riley's face relaxed. The tension Arthur hadn't realized he'd been carrying melting away. Okay, that's good. Yeah, Arthur said softly. It is good. They went inside together. Riley settled at the kitchen table to do homework while Arthur started dinner. Spaghetti with meat sauce. One of the few meals Arthur could make reliably well. While the sauce simmered, he helped Riley with math problems, praising his son's careful work. Later, after dinner at his father's cabin, after Riley had fallen asleep on the old man's couch with his stomach full of home cooking, Arthur and his father sat on the dock, feet dangling over the water. You did good, son, his father said, voice rough with pride. A lot of men would have given up, would have let the system roll over them. I had help. Arthur looked at the old man. You taught me how to fight. I taught you how to prepare. You did the fighting yourself. His father pulled out a flask, taking a sip before offering it to Arthur. Your mama will be proud too. She always said you had steel in you. Just took the right situation to bring it out. Arthur thought of his mother, dead 10 years now from cancer that had eaten her from the inside out. She'd been soft-spoken but unbreakable, the kind of woman who smiled sweetly while doing exactly what she knew was right. He hoped she would be proud, hoped she'd understand why he'd had to burn his marriage down to save his son. What happens now? His father asked. Arthur took a sip from the flask, the whiskey burning warm. Now, we just live. Riley goes to school. I work. We fish on weekends. Normal life. Normal's underrated, his father agreed. People spend so much time chasing extraordinary, they forget normal is a gift. They sat in companionable silence, watching the lake reflect the sunset, orange and pink and purple bleeding together in ways that seemed impossible but happened every single day. Nature's reminder that beauty came from endings as much as beginnings. A month later, on a Saturday morning, Arthur took Riley to the local animal shelter. Why are we here? Riley asked, holding tight to his father's hand as they walked through the parking lot. Just a look, Arthur said. I want to show you something. Inside, the shelter smelled like pine cleaner and dog food. A volunteer greeted them, and Arthur explained what he was looking for. She led them to the back, to a row of kennels where dogs of all sizes paced or slept or pressed their noses against chain link. At the end of the row, a brown and white pit bull lay on a blanket, head on his paws. Riley stopped walking. That's, he whispered. Daddy, that's the dog. That's Brutus, Arthur confirmed. He was taken from your grandmother's house after what happened. The shelter's been rehabilitating him. The dog lifted his head, looking at them with dark, intelligent eyes. His tail gave a cautious wag. He looked sad, Riley said quietly. He was treated badly for a long time, made him scared and defensive. Arthur crouched beside his son, but he's learning that not everyone's going to hurt him, that he can trust again. Riley looked up at his father. Like me? The connection hit Arthur in the chest. Yeah, buddy. Like you. The volunteer opened the kennel, and Brutus stood, stretching. She clipped a leash to his collar and brought him out into the small yard behind the shelter. The dog moved carefully, watching them, waiting for permission. Can I pet him? Riley asked. Slowly. Let him sniff your hand first. Riley extended his hand, palm up, the way Arthur had taught him. Brutus sniffed carefully, then pressed his massive head into the boy's palm. Riley laughed, surprised, delighted, and began petting the dog with gentle strokes. He's soft, Riley said. I thought he'd be mean. He was never mean, Arthur explained. He was just scared. When things scare us, sometimes we get angry or defensive. But underneath, most creatures just want to be safe. They spent 20 minutes in the yard, Riley throwing a tennis ball, while Brutus lumbered after it, his tail wagging with increasing enthusiasm. By the time they left, the fear in Riley's eyes when looking at the pit bull had transformed into something else. Recognition that scary things could become safe things, given the right conditions. Driving home, Riley was quiet then. Daddy, can people change like Brutus? Can they learn to be nice after being mean? Arthur thought about Denise, sitting through therapy sessions she didn't believe in, performing change she'd never actually make. Thought about Emma, who might one day understand what she'd sacrificed but more likely never would. Thought about himself, the man who'd learned to fight only when fighting became the only way to protect what mattered. Some people can change, Arthur said carefully, if they really want to, if they're willing to look at themselves honestly and do hard work. But some people, he paused, choosing words carefully. Some people would rather stay the same and blame everyone else for problems they created. Like Grandma Denise? Yeah, like her. Riley nodded, accepting this wisdom the way children do, adding it to his growing understanding of how the world worked, filing it away for future reference. That night, Arthur stood in Riley's doorway watching his son sleep. The boy's face was peaceful, one hand tucked under his cheek, his breathing deep and steady. No nightmares, no fear, just the simple rest of a child who felt safe in his own bed, in his own home, in his own life. Arthur had one, not by forgiving, not by forgetting, not by being the bigger person or turning the other cheek or any of the platitudes people offered when they wanted you to accept abuse quietly. He'd won by being ruthless when ruthlessness was required, by documenting everything, by using the system designed to protect children exactly as it was meant to be used, by refusing to compromise on his son's safety for the sake of keeping peace with people who'd never deserved peace in the first place. Denise Hammond had tried to break Riley, to mold him into something hard and cruel like herself. She'd failed, and in failing, she'd exposed herself so completely that even a court system known for caution had recognized her as a threat. Emma had chosen her mother over her son. She'd live with that choice. Maybe it would wake her up eventually. Maybe not. Either way, it was no longer Arthur's concern. His only concern was the sleeping child in front of him, the boy who'd survived trauma and emerged stronger, gentler, more certain of who he was and what he deserved. Arthur had given Riley something precious, the knowledge that someone would always fight for him, that protection was possible, that safety wasn't just a hope, but a promise his father would keep at any cost. Arthur pulled Riley's door nearly closed, leaving it open just a crack the way his son preferred. He walked downstairs, poured himself a glass of water, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the lake. Moonlight painted the water silver, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called into the darkness. Tomorrow was Sunday. Riley didn't have school. They'd sleep late, make pancakes, maybe drive into town for the farmer's market where Riley liked to pet the therapy dogs that local volunteers brought. Simple pleasures. Normal life. The gift his father had called it, and he'd been right. Arthur had burned down a marriage, endured a custody battle, and made permanent enemies of his in-laws. He'd paid the cost of protection in full, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat, because in the end, some things were worth any price. And Riley's safety, Riley's peace, Riley's chance to grow into whoever he was meant to become without fear or manipulation or cruelty, that was worth everything. Arthur set down his glass and went to bed. For the first time in years, he fell asleep easily, no tension in his shoulders, no half-formed contingency plans racing through his mind. Just the deep rest of someone who'd fought the battle that mattered most, and won.